So what are we gonna do today, Cousin PW?
The same thing we do every day, Melvin. Try to take over the neighborhood.
Whoa there, Cousin PW. Last time I seen you driving like this was on the Dukes of Hazzard.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Melvin.
Well, what do you mean, Cousin PW?
Well, I figured it was about high time to release another Heifer of the Week, and the video we're going to be looking at deals with the Dukes of Hazzard.
Well, the Dukes of Hazzard? Well, ain't that show about almost 40 years old? Who in the world would do a video on that?
Steve, you're blocked. Shive. Yeah, that's right. Oh, Stevie boy went back almost 40 years to look at this masterpiece of filmmaking that, you know, we're all supposed to take so seriously, and pointed out 5, quote, dangerous, unquote, things about the Dukes of Hazzard. Now, I know my buddy Randy Monkey already done a video on this, but I thought I'd add my unique perspective as an actual redneck that sat through this show, sometimes by force. Really wasn't one of my favorites, but hey, if you liked it, it's all, you know, it's all good. But sat through this when it was actually in first run, and maybe give you my unique perspective as actually being a redneck from the South. So, without further ado, let's get into this thing. Heifer of the Week.
Them good old boys might not have meant any harm, but unfortunately, intention isn't everything. Here are 5 harmful things about the Dukes of Hazzard. Number 1, it prominently featured Confederate imagery. Even more than John Schneider and Tom Wopat, or Catherine Bach and her denim cutoffs, the star of the Dukes of Hazzard was the Duke's 1969 Dodge Charger, nicknamed the General Lee, with a Confederate flag, the flag of the army that fought to defend slavery in the American Civil War, painted on the roof. You can't watch an episode of the show without seeing that flag all over the place, which is the main reason why now, for the most part, you can't watch an episode of the show. But the General Lee with its rebel flag roof is just the beginning.
Steve. Not only are you an idiot, but you've just proved you don't history well. Yeah, the car prominently displays a Confederate flag. But it doesn't just stand for slavery. And if you knew your history any at all, you'd know that the American Civil War was much more complicated than that. Matter of fact, it's still hotly debated today on exactly what it was about and how, what spurred it. It wasn't just about slavery. Was that a part of it? Sure. But also so were state rights and a lot of other things. It's well known that Abraham Lincoln, in his first inaugural address, told the South that he had no intention of ending slavery. They only sought to keep it from spreading to all the new territory that was got through the Louisiana Purchase and beyond, to the west. There was a lot of reasons behind it. And to show you maybe something you don't know, that it wasn't just about slavery, did you know that some of the so-called Union states still had legal slavery and didn't end it until Abraham Lincoln ended slavery in the whole country? The border states such as Kentucky that were neutral at first but eventually switched over to the Union side, they didn't end slavery. They still had it. This was not just about slavery. It's just way more complicated than that. But let's get past the history lesson and go to what it means to people in the South today that might fly the flag. I mean, after all, isn't that the main thing here? What does it mean to them? Because, it means to you slavery, but to them, it's an example of standing up for states' rights. That's what they thought they were doing. Yeah, maybe some of the officers owned slaves, but the average person on the ground did not, on either side. And the states, the Confederate states, felt that they were pushed into a corner, so they seceded. And the North felt that they couldn't allow them to secede because that was unconstitutional, and they went to war, regardless of what the background issues were. That's what actually kicked it off. So Southerners today don't see it as, if you went to a good old boy down in the South and asked them what does that flag stand for, I guarantee you 99.9% of them are not going to say slavery. It's not even in their mind. They're going to tell you it stands for state rights and the right to stand up for the sovereignty of your state. So yeah, you fail, Steve. And by the way, if, as you say, you can't even watch an episode now just because the Confederate flag makes an appearance, then you really need to grow a thicker skin and quit putting so much stock in your fifis.
Number 2, it depicted a romanticized South. It's easy to see why the Dukes of Hazzard was so popular. It's an affectionate celebration of the American South and its cherished traditions, which is affable and non-threatening enough for Yankees to enjoy too. In the show, there is no injustice that can't be overcome by a fast car and a bit of farm boy ingenuity. The local authorities are corrupt, but they're also easily thwarted buffoons who never do any real harm. Most everybody is dirt poor, yet they still lead lives of breathless adventure, and there's no racism to speak of, mostly because there are almost no black folks to speak of.
I'm gonna leave your comment about the black folks until the next segment, which these two really could be put together, but you separated them as two different reasons. Are you saying that the Deep South can't be romanticized? Do you think that they're all inbred idiot rednecks? Do you think they're all terrible racists? Because that's what you're coming across as. So who's the real racist here? Who's the real bigot, Steve? The people portrayed in the Dukes of Hazzard? And the people they're based off of? Or you, the northerner that thinks he knows what all the South is about?
Number 3, it whitewashed the Deep South. While it wasn't unusual for American network television shows in the 1970s and 80s to feature few or no black performers, that lack of diversity is particularly glaring on a show set in a region of the country with a long history of sometimes violent racial inequality and centered on a pair of heroic white country boys who race around the county in the aforementioned General Lee. The problem wasn't lost on the show's creator, Guy Waldron, who tried to compensate by casting black guest stars as authority figures, including as the sheriff of a neighboring county. But even so, the scarcity of black faces in a series set in rural Georgia, where that fucking car is practically the lead protagonist, is a little tough to just shrug off.
Steve, have you ever left the protection of your little echo chamber and actually traveled through the Deep South? I'm guessing not. I have. Matter of fact, that's where I'm from. The little town I'm from in Kentucky has all of 600 people, and all of them white. Not because blacks aren't welcome. There was a black family that lived there once upon a time, and they were treated just like everybody else. It's just, that's the way it was. You're a northerner. You're used to bigger cities and having all this diversity. It's not like that out in the country. You have smaller towns. It is absolutely correct to portray the small town as being all white, because a lot of them were, as well as a lot of small towns being all black. That's the way that it worked out, because it's not a big city. It's a congregation of smaller towns. But again, you're showing your ignorance. They didn't whitewash anything. they portrayed the Deep South as it really exists. And if you got out of your echo chamber just once and done a little looking around, you would know that.
Number 4, it reinforced right-wing anti-government narratives. In the late 70s and early 80s, the Republican Party was shifting its message to attract more working-class voters by appealing to tradition, low-key white supremacy, and resentment of the government. Though it almost certainly wasn't intentional on the part of the show's creators, the Dukes of Hazzard provided this new American conservatism with its ideal mascots in the Dukes, who rebelled against crooked government officials and embodied rugged individualism. In the pilot episode, Bo tells his girlfriend that Uncle Jesse would rather starve than accept government assistance. Now there's a real American.
Steve, you're causing me to lose brain cells here, buddy. Are you seriously saying that they're right-wing extremists because they refuse government help and don't want to go on the dole? Seriously? Again, it's a pretty accurate portrayal of people from that area. My own father never went on government assistance, even when they needed it, because he felt that way. I myself, though I have taken help from time to time, try to minimize it to the best of my ability. I don't want to be on anybody's dole. I don't want handouts from anybody. Government, individuals, anybody. I was taught to stand up on my own, you know? But yeah, that makes me a racist, right-wing, anti-authoritarian extremist. Whatever you say, Steve.
Number 5, it encouraged people to minimize casual racism. You won't find any willful bigotry on the Dukes of Hazzard. Even that flag was intended to represent Southern pride. It's the same heritage, not hate line of horseshit that people still try to sell today. But just because the racism wasn't intentional doesn't mean that we shouldn't notice it. If instead of this, the roof of the Duke's car looked like this, we'd recognize the problem immediately. Well, most of us would anyway. But this, we view this as different somehow. Because this has been normalized, even to those of us who detest it. And it wasn't hate-spewing, cross-burning racists who normalized it. It was folks like Bo and Luke. Just good old boys. Wouldn't change if they could. The hardest part is picking only 5. Catch you next time.
And again, you're back on the flag. This really isn't 5 reasons. It's been only 2 that you've stretched out to 5. And you say, the hardest part is only picking 5. Bigoted much? I mean, your hate for redneck America is really showing there, Steve. Yeah, your narcissism. How about that? But I've already covered the flag as much as I can, but good job saying that it wasn't intentional and then showing a flag to replace it that would be incredibly intentional. It's apples and oranges. Ever heard the term straw man there, Mr. Shives? You know, it's all about what it means to you. You're right. It is. It's about what it means to you. Take the swastika, for example. Didn't start out as a bad symbol, but it sure means that now. You know, I get that. But to the original purveyors of it, and the other religions and cultures that had it before the Nazis got a hold of it and twisted it, sure didn't have the intent that the Nazis did out of it, did they? Like I said, though, I've already covered the flag. I don't need to beat that drum again. Steve, I always knew you was an idiot. But I didn't know how much of a racist, yes, racist, against Southern Americans, you're racist, that you were. I didn't know how stupid of history you were, and how bigoted. And come on, you go after a 40-year-old TV show? What's the matter? You can't find enough around you now to whine and complain about? Anyway, thank God this video is over. Danny the Dingo, you owe me big time for doing this. But that's it for me. And as always, get out of my yard.